Whittward Carver presents the Swedish Meatball Massacre. Alright, you lingonberry-loving logicians, gather round. I've cooked up a tale that's darker than a Swedish winter and more twisted than an IKEA instruction manual. Picture this: the quaint town of Fjällbacka, where the biggest scandal is usually who took the last meatball at the smorgasbord. But not today. Today, there's been a murder. And not just any murder. A murder at the annual meatball competition. It's like a Stieg Larsson novel, but with more meat and less tattoos. Our hero, Inspector Blunderbuss, is on the case. He's a man who can outdrink a Viking, outsmoke a sauna, and outswear a reindeer herder with a stubbed toe. But this case is like trying to find a meatball in a snowstorm. It's blimey impossible. First suspect, Olaf, the local butcher. He's got a motive. His meatballs were snubbed last year for being too spherical. I mean, who gets snubbed for perfection? Apparently, Olaf does. But when Blunderbuss questions him, Olaf's more slippery than a greased-up herring. I was just chopping some liverwurst, he says, waving a cleaver the size of a small child. Isn't it just a coincidence? Blunderbuss raises an eyebrow. Coincidence, my arse. Next up, we've got Astrid, the librarian. She's been feuding with the victim over the proper classification of cookbooks. Non-fiction? Reference? Self-help? Things got heated. When Blunderbuss asks her about her alibi, she snaps. I was organising the Dewey Decimal System, wasn't I? Blunderbuss nods. Ah, the old Dewey Decimal Defence. Classic. Meanwhile, Sergeant Bumblebee is canvassing the scene. He's new, eager, and about as helpful as a chocolate fireguard in a blizzard, but twice as sweet. Sir, I found a clue, he shouts, holding up a half-eaten meatball. Blunderbuss squints at it. Bumblebee, that's not a clue. That's your lunch. Bumblebee looks crestfallen. Oh, right. Sorry, sir. Back at the station, Blunderbuss is drowning in paperwork and pickled herring. He's got more motives than he can shake a stick at, and not a single confession. He's starting to think this case is as solvable as a Rubik's Cube in the dark. Just then, Bumblebee bursts in. Sir, I've got it. I know who did it. Blunderbuss looks up, hope in his eyes. Well, who is it, Bumblebee? Bumblebee grins. It was to the lingonberry jam. It's been poisoned. Blunderbuss facepalms. Bumblebee, that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. Just then, the phone rings. It's the lab. Blunderbuss listens, his face growing grimmer than a rainy day in Stockholm. He hangs up, looks at Bumblebee, and says, We've been looking at this all wrong. It's not about who had the motive. It's about who had the opportunity. They rush back to the scene, Blunderbuss leading the way like a man possessed. He stops in front of the judge's table, points at the half-eaten plate of meatballs, and shouts, It was you, the judge. You had the opportunity to taste every meatball, to slip in the poison unnoticed. The judge, a portly man with a lingonberry stain on his shirt, looks shocked. But I'm lactose intolerant, he stammers. Blunderbuss smirks. Exactly. And what's the one ingredient every meatball has? Milk. You did it to frame someone else, didn't you? To get revenge for your own meatball debacle of '09. The judge pales, then crumbles like a day-old crisp bread. All right. It was me, I did it, I just wanted to win just once. Blunderbuss slaps on the cuffs, shakes his head. Well, you won something all right. A one-way ticket to the slammer. And so, the Swedish Meatball Massacre came to an end. Blunderbuss got his man. Bumblebee got his lunch, and the town of Fjällbacka got a new scandal to talk about. As for the meatballs, well, they were declared too dangerous to consume and thrown out. A tragedy, really. But at least no one else got hurt, except maybe the judge's feelings. But who cares about that, right? Until next time, folks. Remember, life's a lot like a meatball competition. Sometimes it's delicious, sometimes it's dangerous, and sometimes it's just plain ridiculous. Bon appétit. Whittward Carver says, keep your friends close and your enemies closer to the meat grinder.